It started 3 months ago when I moved into the Meridian Apartments on Elm Street. I was 28, fresh out of a messy divorce, and desperate for a cheap place to rebuild my life. The building was one of those pre-war structures with high ceilings and crown molding that had seen better days. The kind of place where the radiators clanked all night and the elevator groaned like it was in pain. I got Unit 4B for $800 a month, which was suspiciously cheap for downtown. The landlord, Mr. Kowalski, was a gruff man in his 70s who seemed eager to rent it out. When I asked why it was so affordable, he just shrugged and muttered something about the previous tenant leaving suddenly. Red flag number 1, but I was broke and desperate. The apartment itself was decent enough, a one-bedroom with hardwood floors and large windows that let in good light. The kitchen was dated but functional, and the bathroom had those old subway tiles that were coming back into style. Everything seemed normal, except for the mirror. It dominated the living room wall, spanning nearly floor to ceiling and stretching about 6 feet wide. The frame was ornate, carved from what looked like dark mahogany with intricate patterns of vines and flowers. It was the kind of antique piece you'd expect to find in a Victorian mansion, not a run-down apartment building. When I asked Mr. Kowalski about it, he said it came with the place and couldn't be removed. "It's attached to the wall," he explained, avoiding my eyes. "Part of the original architecture. You'll get used to it." The mirror was beautiful, I'll give it that. The glass was old and had that slight waviness that comes with age, giving everything reflected in it a dreamlike quality. But there was something about it that made me uncomfortable from day one. Maybe it was the way it seemed to dominate the room, or how it caught light from angles that didn't quite make sense. I told myself I was being ridiculous. It was just a mirror. The first few weeks were uneventful. I settled into my routine work at the insurance office, take-out dinners, Netflix on the couch. The mirror became background noise, something I stopped noticing consciously. But subconsciously, I think I was always aware of it. I'd catch myself avoiding looking directly at it, or feeling uncomfortable when my back was turned to it. It was Mrs. Chen who first mentioned the oddities. She lived in 4A, right next door, and was one of those elderly women who knew everyone's business. She'd lived in the building for 30 years and had seen tenants come and go from 4B with unusual frequency. "That mirror," she said one evening when we met in the hallway, "it's been there since I moved in. Every tenant complains about it eventually." "Complains how?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Mrs. Chen glanced around nervously, as if the walls might be listening. "Strange things. Reflections that don't match. Sounds coming from behind the glass. The last tenant, poor Mr. Rodriguez, he swore he saw his dead wife in it." I laughed it off, but her words stuck with me. That night, I found myself studying the mirror more closely. The reflection looked normal, my couch, my TV, my coffee table. But there was something about the depth of it that seemed wrong. It was like looking into water instead of glass, as if the surface went deeper than it should. The first incident happened on a Tuesday night in October. I was reading on the couch, my back to the mirror, when I heard a soft tapping sound. Tap. 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 Like fingernails on glass. I turned around, but the mirror showed only my reflection looking back. The sound stopped. I convinced myself it was the building settling, or maybe a branch outside hitting a window. Old buildings made weird noises. But as I tried to return to my book, I felt eyes on me. That prickly sensation you get when someone's watching you. I looked up at the mirror again, and for just a moment, I could have sworn I saw movement in the reflection, a shadow that didn't match anything in the room. The incidents became more frequent. I'd wake up in the middle of the night to find the mirror reflecting moonlight in impossible ways, casting shadows that danced across my walls. Sometimes I'd catch glimpses of shapes moving behind my reflection, like there were people in the room with me. But when I'd turn around, I'd be alone. I started avoiding the living room after dark. I'd cook dinner and eat it in the kitchen, then go straight to the bedroom to watch TV. But even from the bedroom, I could feel the mirror's presence. It was like it was watching me, waiting for something. The breakthrough came on a foggy Thursday morning in November. I was getting ready for work when I noticed something odd in the mirror. The reflection of my apartment looked different, subtly wrong. The couch was the same color, but the cushions were arranged differently. The coffee table was in the right place, but it had a vase of flowers that I didn't own. My bookshelf was there, but the books were different titles. I stood there for 10 minutes, comparing the mirror to the actual room. The differences were small but unmistakable. It was like looking at a parallel version of my apartment, similar but not identical. My heart hammered as I realized what this meant. The mirror wasn't just reflecting my room. It was reflecting somewhere else entirely. That night, I decided to test it. I rearranged my furniture, moving the coffee table to the left and rotating the couch to face the window. But in the mirror, everything remained in its original position. The reflection was completely independent of reality. I called in sick to work the next day and spent hours observing the mirror. The reflected room seemed to operate on its own schedule. Sometimes the lighting would change with no corresponding change in my apartment. I'd see the reflection of curtains blowing in a breeze when my windows were closed. Once, I watched the reflected TV turn on by itself, though I couldn't hear any sound. But the most disturbing thing was the figure I started seeing. Just glimpses at first, a shadow moving past the reflected doorway, a shape sitting on the reflected couch when I wasn't looking directly at it. The figure was indistinct, like it was made of smoke or fog, but it was definitely human-shaped. I tried to research the building's history, but information was scarce. The Meridian had been built in 1924, and there were rumors of a fire in the 1940s that had killed several residents. But nothing concrete, nothing that explained the mirror. It was Mrs. Chen who filled in the blanks. I found her in the laundry room one evening, and she looked haggard, like she hadn't been sleeping well. "You're starting to see it too, aren't you?" she said without preamble. I nodded, not trusting my voice. "The mirror shows the apartment as it was," she continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "Back when Margaret lived there." "Margaret?" "Margaret Holloway. She lived in Forby from 1943 until the fire. She was a young woman, maybe 25, worked as a seamstress. They say she was very beautiful, very vain. She had that mirror installed herself, special ordered from some antique dealer in Boston." Mrs. Chen's hands shook as she folded her laundry. "She died in the fire, but she never left. The mirror was the only thing that survived intact. They rebuilt the apartment around it, but Margaret, she stayed." "That's impossible," I said, but even as I spoke, I felt the truth of it in my bones. "The other tenants, they all see her eventually. Some last longer than others. Mr. Rodriguez, he saw his wife because Margaret was lonely. She shows you what you want to see at first, then she shows you what she wants you to see." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed with my door closed, but I could feel the mirror's presence through the wall. At 3 a.m., I heard music, a slow, melancholy tune that sounded like it was coming from far away. I crept to the bedroom door and peered down the hallway toward the living room. The mirror was glowing with a soft, ethereal light. And in its reflection, I saw her. Margaret Holloway stood in the reflected living room, wearing a blue dress that looked like it was from the 1940s. She was beautiful, just as Mrs. Chen had said, with dark hair styled in victory rolls and red lips. But her eyes were hollow, desperate, and when she looked toward the mirror's surface, toward me, I felt a chill that went straight to my soul. She began to move closer to the mirror, and I realized with growing horror that she was walking toward me. Not toward the glass, but toward the barrier between her world and mine. Her reflection grew larger as she approached, and I could see the details of her face, the sadness in her eyes, the way her mouth moved as if she were speaking words I couldn't hear. I slammed the bedroom door and pressed my back against it, heart pounding. But even with the door closed, I could still feel her presence. She was trying to communicate something, and I was terrified to find out what. The next morning, I called Mr. Kowalski and told him I wanted to break my lease. He was surprisingly understanding, almost relieved. But when I mentioned the mirror, his tone changed. "You can't leave," he said quietly. "Not until she's finished with you." "What do you mean?" "Margaret chooses her tenants. She's been waiting for the right person, someone who can see her clearly. The others, they were just practice." I hung up and immediately started packing. But when I tried to leave the building, I found the front door wouldn't open. The lock seemed to be working fine, but the door itself wouldn't budge. I tried the back exit, the fire escape, even the windows. Nothing. It was like the building itself was holding me prisoner. Mrs. Chen found me in the lobby, pulling uselessly at the door handle. "She won't let you leave until you help her," she said sadly. "That's what happened to the others. They tried to ignore her, tried to leave, but she won't let them go." "Help her with what?" "She wants to cross over. She's been trapped in that mirror for 80 years, watching the world through glass. She needs someone to break the barrier." "How?" Mrs. Chen's face went pale. "You have to join her. In the mirror. It's the only way she can escape." I spent the next week in a state of constant terror. Margaret appeared in the mirror every night, and each time she seemed more solid, more real. She would mouth words I couldn't understand, press her hands against the glass from the inside, and sometimes I swear I could hear her voice, faint and distant. The apartment began to change. My furniture would rearrange itself to match the reflection. Food would appear in my refrigerator that I didn't remember buying. My clothes would be replaced with others, older styles, women's clothing in my size. Margaret was trying to make my world match hers. I stopped eating, stopped sleeping. I knew I was losing my mind, but I couldn't stop watching the mirror. Margaret was becoming more desperate, more insistent. She would appear during the day now, standing in the reflected sunlight, beckoning me to come closer. It was on a rainy Sunday night that I finally understood what she wanted. I was standing in front of the mirror, exhausted and broken, when she appeared again. This time, she wasn't alone. Behind her, in the reflected apartment, I could see other figures. Shadowy shapes that I realized were the previous tenants. Mr. Rodriguez was there, and a woman I didn't recognize, and others. They were all trapped in Margaret's world, prisoners in the glass. Margaret stepped forward and placed her hand against the mirror's surface. For the first time, I could hear her voice clearly. "Join us," she whispered. "It's not so bad here. We have each other. We have forever." I looked at the other figures, and I understood. This was Margaret's solution to her loneliness. She couldn't leave the mirror, so she was collecting companions. Each tenant who could see her clearly, who could break through the barrier between worlds, became part of her eternal prison. But I also saw something else in the reflection. Behind the group of trapped souls, in the far corner of the reflected room, there was a door. A door that glowed with warm, golden light. An exit that none of them had found because they were too focused on Margaret to look for it. I realized what I had to do. "I'll join you," I said, and Margaret smiled for the first time since I'd been seeing her. I reached out and touched the mirror's surface. The glass felt warm, almost alive, and my hand passed through it like it was water. The barrier was gone. I could step into Margaret's world. But instead of walking toward her, I ran. I pushed past the confused spirits and sprinted for the glowing door. Behind me, I heard Margaret scream, a sound like breaking glass and dying birds. The other trapped souls tried to grab me, but I was faster, more desperate. I reached the door and threw it open. Blinding light poured out, and I felt myself falling, tumbling through space and time. When I landed, I was on the floor of my apartment, gasping and shaking. The mirror was dark and still. But I could see Margaret's face pressed against the glass from the inside, her mouth open in a silent scream of rage and desperation. The other souls were gone. I hoped they had found the door after I showed them the way. I packed my bags and left that night. This time, the door opened easily. I moved across the country, changed my name, started over. But I still see Margaret sometimes, in other mirrors, other reflections. She's still looking for me, still trying to build her collection of eternal companions. That's why I'm telling you this story. Not because I want you to believe me, but because I need you to understand. If you ever find yourself in an apartment with a mirror that shows things that aren't there, if you start seeing figures in the glass that don't belong, run. Don't try to understand it, don't try to help. Just run. Because some prisons are designed to look like paradise, and some monsters wear the faces of those who need rescuing. Margaret Holloway is still out there, in mirrors across the country, looking for lonely people who can see her clearly. And once she finds you, once she marks you as her own, the only way out is through. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night, I don't think I really escaped. I think I just moved to a different level of her prison. Because every mirror I look into now shows me something I don't want to see. And sometimes, late at night, I can hear her voice calling my name. She's patient, is Margaret. She has all the time in the world. And I'm starting to think that maybe, just maybe, she's right. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to have forever with someone who understands what it's like to be trapped. Maybe I should stop running and go home. The mirror is waiting for me, after all. It's always waiting. And I'm so very tired of being alone. This story was found among the personal effects of David Martinez, who disappeared from his apartment in Portland, Oregon on December 15, 2024. The apartment had no mirrors.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for listening. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like and subscribe button, and then share with your friends. Your support helps us grow and create even more awesome content. We appreciate you being part of the journey. Here are a couple more videos for you to check out.